What do people usually say that doesn't make the slightest bit of sense? Story 1. Just be yourself. After years of that advice, I found out they meant to be confident. Well, hell, I was being confident, but I was being confidently weird. I needed to stop being weird. That was what I was doing wrong. When I say stop being weird, I mean that I demonstrated no social skills I would. Refer to my ex-wife as my ex-wife when telling stories that involved her instead of a friend and I. When it was relevant, there was someone else in the story, but not her relationship to me. Tell people all about my family dramas as easily as people talk about the weather, making it sound like my life is nothing but drama, which it isn't. Say I was looking for something serious, making people think that I was one day from proposing. Which no, I'm not Teddy. I don't have the thrills for the pills and you weirdo. I'm still weird in that I love and am open about collecting cartoons from my childhood and loving to play modded Skyrim. But I've learned the social skills I need to not freak people out with how intense I can get about things. Story 2. Pre-K teacher here, because I said so. Worst reason a teacher/parent/adult can give to a child for anything. Children need to know there's a reason for any restrictions you might put on them, so that caution or value can be taught. Because I said so is a cheap, power-infused statement that doesn't teach any life lessons other than some people will try to use their authority to control you with no deserved explanation or reason. And those people suck. Story 3. Just gotta pull yourself up by your bootstraps. People use this all the time to mean you have to buck up and be willing to go through tough times. But there is an issue with the phrase in its conception. It is meant to be ironic. The whole point of the saying is to say that start yourself with nothing is literally an impossible thing to expect. You cannot pull yourself up by the straps of your boots. If you tried actually doing that, it wouldn't work. You aren't supposed to take it as a hopeful challenge. It's meant to remind you that you should ask for help when you need it, because no one can do anything alone. Story 4. I have a list. Enjoy your youth. Youth is for learning and making mistakes. You're allowed to have fun with it, but it's not meant to be the best years of your life. Great minds think alike. I don't actually hate it, but I find it funny that the German equivalent translates to 2S, same thought. We all die anyway. You say that like it's a bad thing. Life is wonderful because it is finite. We're all in the same boat. No, we're in the same ocean. You're on a cruise ship. They're on a piece of driftwood. I'm begging you to throw out the goddamn life ring. Fool me twice, shame on me. How am I to blame for your decision to take advantage of my kindness? Everything happens for a reason. Me sitting in a corner after witnessing a grown-ass man buying a Donald Duck body pillow. What was the reason? Story 5. Okay, can someone explain the moral of this? Because my dad always says it, but I don't think he even knows because he dodges explaining. When having breakfast, the chicken participates, but the pig commits. Talking about eggs versus sausage bacon. What does that mean? Am I supposed to commit and get eaten? Or should I participate in a secondary way? In which case, do my eggs get eaten? Am I happy about this? At least it wasn't me and just my eggs, but don't you want your eggs to survive? Someone please explain. Story 6. Both of these annoy me to no end for some reason. When people say, oh, it's just a few bad apples, or when businesses say, you know what they say about a jack of all trades. You're only saying half of the phrase and are literally using them with the exact opposite of their original meaning. I don't know why it bothers me so much. Story 7. I could care less. That implies that you do already care to some extent. I hear that could care less is mostly an American thing, though. Brits, for example, say couldn't care less. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It means to start trying really hard to improve your own situation. However, it's physically impossible to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Sweat like a pig. Pigs don't really sweat. Needle in a haystack. When I first heard this, I felt like needle referred to something like a sewing needle, and that's why you referred to something hard to find by saying it was like finding a needle in a haystack, because a needle would be too small to easily find. But no, needle refers to a needle of hay. Something where there would be a lot of, and therefore be easy to find in a haystack. One bad apple. Often used to talk about how one bad person doesn't make the entire group bad. However, the original term was one bad apple spoils the entire bunch, because apples contain cyanide, and a rotting apple would release enough cyanide to cause the other apples to spoil. Story 8. Common sense solutions. Anytime someone says that be aware, they're the same people who think women can just hold in their periods, that prohibition definitely won't create a violent black market this time, that corporate deregulation and tax breaks mean more jobs, or that rights should be debated and subject to whomever can still legally vote. Story 9. Healthy as a horse. Anyone who says this must have never had to take care of horses. Horses have the health equivalent to a car's dashboard being lit up, like every light. Everything's wrong, and it's between the gods and that damn horse to know how and what to do to fix it. If people say that to me, I'm assuming they have cancer of multiple areas in the body that are all distinct and not connected in diagnosis and have probably had multiple surgeries where the doctors are unable to find tumors. There are so many animals that are actually health, but horses in general are not. Story 10. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemies. You've ed up severely for me to consider you my enemy in the first place. To be the worst of them means you probably did something absolutely atrocious and contrary to basic humanity. I will absolutely wish the very worst things on you. There is no depth to be reached where mercy will be considered. Story 11. Over yonder. Over yonder can mean anything, bro. 1 foot, 50 feet, MF 8K wet. Yeah, you just go up yonder ways and make that left right there and go on down some ways and it'll be on your right. Like, okay, Karen, I'm not from around these parts. Text me an address, please. Story 12. Everything happens for a reason. No, not it doesn't. Kids get cancer, people get T-boned at an intersection by some drunk driver and die in their car. A fire burns down your house. Things happen by accident with no intention behind it all the time. Things happen for literally no reason whatsoever. People are born, people die, people go blind, people get rich, lose everything. And it's not always for any reason. Story 13. When anybody posts, texts a word with the emphasis being the last letter of said word, for example, it was huge. This doesn't make a lick of sense. I'm certain they mean huge when physically speaking, but type it out repeating the last letter. Is it laziness or idiocy? Both? I'm not even part of the grammar police, but it's just annoying AF. Story 14. It's better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all. TF it is. If you love the right person and experience the right things at the right times in the right ways, losing that person in any way has ways of doing irreparable physiological and emotional damage. Story 15. The definition of insanity, quote, it quite simply means not sane. It has nothing to do with trial and error or repeatedly poor expectations. Facebook would have you think this is sacrilege against Einstein, but he never even said that. It's obviously supposed to be like a motivational quote, but to call it the definition of the word is unfortunately boldly and, to me, distractingly incorrect. Story 16. One thing that makes no sense to me is when people say, I'm going on a detox diet. The idea that your body is somehow toxic and needs a special diet to cleanse it is misleading. Our bodies already have highly efficient systems, like the liver, kidneys, and skin, that naturally detoxify and eliminate waste. Story 17, one that bugs me. When a friend talks about something bad that has happened to them, the response of, I'm sorry to hear that. That sounds like they wish their friend had never mentioned it. Maybe it makes them sad too, so keep your tales of misery to yourself. How about, I'm sorry that happened? This makes much more sense to me. Story 18. Anything zodiac related. People must have similar or conflicting personalities based on when they were born. Millions of people are born around the same time. I don't know anything about the zodiac, but people say asinine things like, I have so much credit card debt. Must be because I am such an impulsive Capricorn. I never get enough sleep. My brain just won't slow down because I am a Libra. I won't ever get a promotion at work because I'm not an ambitious Leo. I need to break up with my girlfriend because our signs are not compatible. Story 19. Any platitude or quote from a famous or semi-famous figure in history. Unfortunately, social media gives people a platform to continually clone this drivel and pass it on year after year. Here's an amusing notion. How about having an original thought that comes from the heart and is based on your life experiences instead of someone else's? Story 20. Let's go! Really? Where are we going? Nowhere. You're just excited and exclaiming that excitement? Great. Good for you. Let's see how far away we can get from what I was taught about my only language. I'm super happy to be even further alienated from other generations. Yes, language is fluid and that change is unending. I can still be annoyed by it. And that one phrase doesn't bug me nearly as much as the all of the ones I can't decipher. I'm missing out on tons of meaning and nuance because I don't regularly talk to elementary and high school kids. Leave me behind, oh winds of time. Let the sun bleach my bones. I can only understand the slang of my parents and grandparents because of Bugs Bunny cartoons. The tiny sliver of history where my understanding lives just gets smaller and further away. Story 21. If you slide on ice, turn into the slide. I have honestly no idea what people are even talking about when they say this. If you're driving on ice and your car starts rotating counterclockwise, the absolute last thing you want to do is turn the wheel counterclockwise. That will just guarantee you lose control and crash. You want to turn your wheel so your tires are pointed in the direction of your momentum. Story 22. It is what it is. Kinda hate this statement with a passion. One fool says to another, yes, I'm a fool. Yet that's simply brushing a problem off with a lazy excuses for something we are unwilling to address or understand. We all have the chance to do better. Sometimes we don't. I get it. Just don't like lazy responses. I give people I avoid a simple response. People I want to connect with even every other day or otherwise get better than that. I feel a lot of us feel pressured to move far too fast, not stop and speak with our fellow humans. Enjoy this company. Check in. Saying things are great or terrible and using that sticker afterward hurts my brain sometimes. Move away from it or change it. We all have the power to say something that has more value. Edits because I suck at words. Story 23. Same difference instead of same thing. Same difference only makes sense with respect to a third thing, and you're comparing the difference of two things to the third thing. But people don't use it that way. They just mean two things are the same. Oh, and ginormous. It literally has no definition, yet people use it liberally to be colloquial, I suppose. Ridiculous. Story 24. Pick yourself up by the bootstraps and get going. Literally describing an impossible task used to make fun of poor people, yet it has been warped into being used as advice for poor people. Story 25. I saw the handwriting on the wall is not a big deal. Who cares if you saw the handwriting? If you read the account in Daniel 5:5, you would read the scarier part. Suddenly the fingers of a man's hand emerged and began writing opposite the lampstand on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the back of the hand that did the writing. Then the king's face grew pale. His thoughts alarmed him. His hip joints went slack, and his knees began knocking together. In other words, the phrase referring to this incident really should highlight the most terrifying part of the ordeal, where a disembodied hand is writing on a wall. A hand, without a body, wrote on a wall, and the words can't be deciphered. In other languages, I wonder if the same expression exists in which the hand is called out. It just so happens that we have the word handwriting. The part left behind, the handwriting, is interesting, and the words had to be interpreted by Daniel because King Belshazzar's soothsayers had no clue what was written. But our expression about it makes it seem pretty tame in comparison. Imagine what social media would say about it. So I have seen a hand without a body writing stuff on wall plaster, and I'm sure that few people know what the phrase refers to. Story 26. There's no such thing as bad publicity. Of course there's such a thing as bad publicity. I don't know who was the moron that came up with that saying, but I hear it all the time and it never makes any sense. The only people that say otherwise are people who have never worked in publicity. I spend all day every day trying to ensure that my clients don't get bad publicity. Story 27. That's the exception that proves the rule. People often say this regarding any exception to any rule, as in, no NLF quarterback has won more than 4 Super Bowls, except for Tom Brady, who's won 7. He's the exception that proves the rule. That's not how it works, though. If you see a sign that says no parking Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., it's safe to assume that you can park there outside of those hours. So Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. is the exception to the rule that you can park there. Story 28. If you don't like the weather, stick around 5 minutes and it will change. Never have I been somewhere that it would change enough every 5 minutes, 12 times an hour, to be remarkable enough that one would notice it. I've seen sun, hail, sun, rain, and sun again, all in just over half an hour, and that was the closest, but that was also the weather for the day. Story 29. I couldn't care less. It's I could care less, because you're trying to imply that yes, you can have the ability to care less, and you're trying to prove that your current point of caring should be at least acknowledged a little bit. I couldn't care less implies your current lack of care is at a permanent point and doesn't plan on lowering or raising. I could care less implies lowering of care, while I couldn't care less implies no movement of care. Story 30. Piece of cake. To say something is easy, or the line from that one song, it's a piece of cake to make a pretty cake. It is not easy to make a good cake, or a pretty cake, or both. I'm a baker and I don't like making cakes. Multiple frostings for different colors. You have to get the right consistency. Fondant is a pain. Piping is a pain. Leveling and making sure everything is flat and even is a pain. Don't even get me started on slicing and cutting cakes for a specific shape. But they sure are tasty. Story 31. This is a very regional one, so you probably won't know what I'm talking about unless you have lived in Massachusetts, New England. But a lot of people here will erroneously make a statement negative. For example, I wish the Patriots were better this season. Yeah, so don't I. It's not always don't. I've heard it with wasn't, isn't, etc. My father was an electrician. So wasn't mine. It is the weirdest thing to me. Every time I hear it, my brain basically short circuits. Story 32. Really basic, but when authority figures, especially parents, say, the world isn't fair, usually in response after a complaint following a collective punishment. Like, of course, the world isn't fair, but when it comes to our own actions, shouldn't we do all we can to make it a fairer world? And aren't we teaching our kids that we are complacent or even complicit with the injustices of the world? Maybe I'm reading way too much into it, but I feel like we are sending kids the wrong message with this statement. Edit, fixed a word. Story 33. The phrase pulled yourself up by your bootstraps, like many phrases, has had its original meaning warped and is now used completely incorrectly. You literally cannot pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, like it makes no sense, and it's been twisted to make the success or failure for a particular person rest solely on their shoulders and conveniently erases an onus from the world and societal caste system we have all been born into. Also, people pronounce prerogative wrong, so that's annoying. Story 34. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. No, missing is an outcome specifically dependent on having taken the shot in the first place. We wouldn't say that someone is constantly missing until the shot hits. You wait until the shot has been taken to determine whether the outcome qualifies as missing. Something like, if you never shoot, you'll never score, would maintain the idea and theme while actually holding water, but instead we have nonsense. Story 35, lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. I'm sure we all already know that rotationally you're going both left and right no matter which way you turn. We have words for this, clockwise and counterclockwise. But we don't use them in this scenario BC. They are too clunky to make a memorable idiom for children. Story 36. Two weights, two measures. To say something is unfair. Of course, if there are two different weights, you'd have two different measurements. A proper saying would be one weight, two measures to imply two things are the same, but get measured differently, or two weights, one measure to imply two things are different, but get measured the same. Story 37. Anything about the ick. The ick isn't some mystical force. It's just human judgment repackaged as a trend. People have always recoiled at habits or values that clash with theirs. It's not new. It's called getting to know someone. You didn't catch the ick. You noticed a mismatch. Maybe they're unkind or selfish or your humor doesn't align. That's not random. It's clarity. Story 38. Work smarter, not harder. I used to work for a company that used this as their unofficial motto. The CEO would pretty much say it all the time, and we'd hear it at least once a week during our company-wide meetings. The flaw in this is that working smarter often involves developing efficient strategies, utilizing tools and prioritizing tasks, all of which require working harder to implement and maintain the practices effectively, which ultimately means more work and therefore leads nowhere. If I have to put in extra effort to maintain the illusion of less work, then it's not worth doing. It's also hypocritical because every company I know that uses this phrase will also complain you aren't working fast enough or up to their standard, which makes me feel like this phrase is used at companies that just keep piling work on and then use it as way to try to say, figure it out, instead of not giving us so much to do and overworking your employees. Story 39. Natives had their land stolen. Give natives their land back. It's called conquest. It's been happening for thousands of years. People also just don't make any sense when they say that. Like, how the hell are you going to give land back that hundreds, thousands of people already live on? Story 40. I could care less, when truly they should be saying they couldn't care less. Because if they are saying the first one, that means they have an amount of care on the subject when they totally mean the second phrase. That one sort of grinds my gears when I hear it. Story 41. I've probably done it myself, but everyone putting "I mean" in front of what they're saying. We know it's what you mean without you explicitly stating it first. It's almost used like a modern version of "to be frank" instead of to clarify meaning. Like you say something, someone misinterprets it, then you say "I mean" to clarify your meaning. But now people just start with it. I don't know, just looks weird to me, especially in text. Story 42. Gifting a gift of some sort. No, we give gifts. Adults can also make themselves understood elegantly without sounding like 3-year-olds, which is what it sounds like when we insist on turning nouns into verbs without caring. Kind of makes you think, don't it? Sometimes it's such a sad sight to see a grown-up trying to be a fellow kid again, like in the old meme. And it raises the same old question. Whose opinion matters so much to that fellow kid and why? Story 43. Okay, so I have a couple. This one is just American as far as I know. But like, take a shower. The are you taking? You're not taking anything. You suddenly stealing a shower bath combo? Have a shower is much more accurate. My next one. When the dollar sign goes before the amount, $30, I'm not going to go to somebody and say, oh, that costs $30. No, that is $30. So why are we writing it the other way, stupid AF? And I've been pissed about it since I was like 12. Story 44. Growing up, when I heard people say patience is a virtue, I always pictured it as patience is avert you. And I wondered, does that mean patience avoids me and I have no patience? Then one day I saw it written and was like, ooh, nice. I always understood it as you need to have patience, but thought, what a weird way to word that. Story 45. People saying, hey, what's up, and leave. I don't get it. Why say what's up if you are going to walk away when I answer? English isn't my first language, so that might be why I don't understand it, but it just doesn't make sense to me. Story 46. People say I invested 10 to 20 million or spent 20 to 30 years. Giving range but not exact or nearly numbers. How the hell you invest 10 to 20 million? It is either 10 or 20, also spent 20 years or 30 years. It's not like you give one day more, it's a whole year also with money. It's not like you give 100 more, it's F million, not a change. You can be precise on that. Story 47. All of these are prime examples of how the smallest percentage of communication is the words. Most of it is tone of voice and body language. We know what the person means when they say, for example, 3 a.m. in the morning. Most of this pedantry. People aren't thinking much when they talk, a lot of the time. It's largely automatic phrases they repeat a lot. Story 48. Irish phrases. My partner is Irish and still confuses me after nearly 3 years together. A few examples, which are very common, can mean to put things somewhere. My favorite use was a story from her friend which contained, my mum ed me in the car. Your one refers to a woman they're talking about. This one is the most annoying for me because usually I have no idea who she's talking about and reply with which one. I will, yeah, means no. Yes, yes, also no. Story 49. For years, my dad used to say, it's a dog-eat-dog world. It's what he heard, and I grew up hearing it a lot. When I actually heard someone say, it's a dog-eat-dog world, I thought, oh, that makes more sense. Asked my dad about it next time he said doggy-dog. And the light bulb went on for him too. We still laugh about it, and occasionally he'll let a doggy dog slip and then smile at me. Story 50. Humans are painfully the same. 23 chromosome pairs in different configurations. People say weird things about types of people. Oh, you're a math person. I'm not a math person. I've never been good at math. Math is a skill. Anyone can learn it. There is no math gene. Replace math with cooking. Anyone can learn it, and there are varying levels of difficulty. Oh, you're a gym person. I am not a gym person. I've never been good at fitness. There is no fitness gene. Everyone has a body. Everyone can improve it. Story 51. High and dry, like it's a bad thing. It's like if you were low, you got swept out to sea in the tsunami, but I was high and dry on the mountain. It's better. It's good. PPL, right? Don't ever say I'm a working girl in case in some English-speaking places that's a euphemism for whore. Also, stop breathing on and squeezing the vegetables. Look with your eyes and buy the ones you touch, frick's sakes. Or just drop trow. Scratch balls and fart on everything. Don't play around. Get her done. While we're on the subject of irritating crap, why is 25 times earnings the new normal? That's Riddick pricey for equities. Come on. Story 52. No bueno. Most monolingual people don't understand that you can't just translate individual words into a phrase in a new language. If you want to say that something is no good in Spanish, the correct grammar in Spanish is to say, no is good, aka, no es bueno. If you are a Spanish speaker who chooses to use the phrase, no bueno, fine. But if you do not speak a single word of Spanish outside of pronto and cerveza, please learn a bit of Spanish grammar before throwing phrases you made up around. Por favor. Story 53. It's already been mentioned several times, but the term near miss makes my skin crawl. And every single manufacturing environment that I've worked in has an overly proud, continuous improvement champion that places this atrocious abomination of a phrase on their metric board. It's embarrassing that management allows and stands behind such abuse of the English language. I cut myself with scissors while cutting this paper. I better report a near miss since I almost didn't cut myself. Oh, wait, that's just an accident. I should just report an accident. This extension cord could cause someone to trip. I should report a near miss because someone could almost, wait, that's just a safety hazard. I should just report a safety hazard because that makes sense, is easy to understand, and doesn't mangle the English language. Story 54, unconditional love. It's an oxymoron, and it never makes sense because there's always a reason why you love someone, and those are the conditions. For example, this is often used in reference to children, but someone loving their children is not unconditional because the condition is that it's their children. The condition is inherent to the child's existence. People treat other people's children very differently than their own children. Story 55 could / should / would have, it's have, I could care less. VIN number, the N stands for number. Using OCD ADHD as an adjective, I'm so OCD. Using dollar and the word dollars to describe an amount of money, $6 million. It's one or the other. That reads $6 million. Using only the monthly payment amount to determine whether a financed purchase is affordable. Story 56. In Poland, there's a saying, albo rybki, albo aquarium. It's either fish or an aquarium, meaning that you can't have something both ways, which makes no sense, because if you want fish, You need an aquarium, and if you have an aquarium, chances are it's for fish. Story 57. My two favorites are sweating like a vicar on a rape charge and sweating like a large swan at a motor show. The second one has a story behind it, not mine. There was apparently some sculptures made from fat lard at a motor show, and due to the temperature, they got all hot and sweaty, as you would imagine, thus the phrase was born. Story 58. Not super common yet, but I know people who unironically will say things like Waymo is too dangerous, and then deadass get into an Uber with a human driver. In a city where Waymo is readily available, and there are already millions of miles of safety data. Story 59, variations on frog in a boiling pot of water. This metaphor is used to say accepting small bad changes until it is too late. There were several controversial studies about this a century ago. The reality is the opposite of the metaphor. If you put a frog in boiling water, it will nearly instantly die, unable to jump out. If you slowly raise the heat, the frog will jump out when it becomes uncomfortable, long before becoming a threat. Story 60. The definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Nobody prefaces it with Einstein's definition of insanity is, although one, he didn't say that, and two, that's not the definition of insanity. It annoys me to no end when I hear people say this. Story 61, agree to disagree. Disagreeing with someone is not something you have to agree to. You either agree or you don't. It should be something like, let's agree that we're not going to come to a resolution to this debate, or one or both of us can't be convinced to change our minds, at least for the time being. Not as pithy, I know, but I think the increased accuracy makes up for it. Story 62. Basically. People say it when the thing they are talking about isn't basically at all, but rather exactly. It's a pet peeve of mine. You upgraded your car? Yeah, I basically just put a new motor in it. What's basically about that? You put a new motor in. Tell me that you put a new motor in. What's that stupid ass basically doing in that sentence? Story 63, I scrolled and didn't see this, but I see it a lot and it bugs me. Saying something like, my car needs washed instead of my car needs to be washed. As far as I know, the first is not grammatically correct. Story 64. I've never understood the phrase all but underscore underscore underscore. I was teaching about steamboats and the article said by whatever year, the steamboat had all but died out. In my understanding, that means the steamboat has done everything except for die out. But the article was talking about the era of the steamboat ending. Same thing for any time someone uses the phrase. Story 65. Don't put your eggs in one basket. BC, for example, say I want to make a cake and it requires 4 eggs and I separate them 2 in one basket and 2 in another. If I trip and break eggs, I still have broken eggs and can't make what I was trying to make. Story 66. I'm going to jump off the deep end. You can't jump off of something you are already in. And if you're above the deep end, you would actually jump into the deep end, not off of it. It's mixing up prepositions and makes no physical sense. One of my biggest pet peeves is this saying. Story 67. I always thought it was funny my wife said nip it in the butt. Wasn't until she sent it over text versus saying it in person that I realized. I told her it's nip this in the bud, like a bud before it flowers. It was the cutest realization from her watching her go from a blank stare to being like, oh, I never saw it written down, only said. Story 66.5. Yo, at Thanksgiving dinner, heard my uncle say. D*, man, Betty, you put your foot in this cornbread? As I'm taking a bite, literally lost my appetite for anything else on the table, total distraught, assuming she put her feet in all the food that was on the table. Turns out it's something Southerners say when the food is great. It's just a disgusting way of expressing it. Story 67. I constantly see Redditors say about some failed relationship as dodged a bullet. Meanwhile, it's a story about a catastrophic divorce after decades or some horrible outcome from a relationship. Like, no, the bullet wasn't dodged. It sounds like it just hit this person squarely in the gut. They have stories of violence, financial problems, loss, court battles, vandalized property, just a myriad of issues. Why the bullet is dodged after they finally end, it doesn't make any sense. This is only utilized properly if they never entered a serious relationship. Even when used correctly, I still think the terms red flag and bullet dodged are so overused on this site. Story 68. This entire comment section made me think of Domic's video about idioms. He was extremely literal, which convinced me he might be autistic. And I'm allowed to say that as I have it myself. It's all going downhill from here. When he said the opposite should be true, but guessed, it made sense as you go downhill by stumbling down. A literal downfall. Or eat your heart out, which I don't blame him for finding confusing. I don't know if he discussed it then, but I suppose the original idea for the saying was when you made, say, a painting so well. You felt so good about it, you exclaim, "Eat your heart out, Picasso," as a way to tell him to eat his career, that he held with great passion. Yet Domic's was, You can't rip your own heart out and eat it. Story 69. Everything happens for a reason. Like, really? Sometimes stuff just sucks and there's no grand cosmic plan. It's a weird way people try to comfort others, but it usually feels dismissive. Story 70. You always think you're right. Now pay attention. This is not the same thing as you think you're always right. Everyone, all the time, thinks they're right. Go ahead, think of something that you know you're wrong about. Not something you used to be wrong about and learned. Not something you're not sure about, but something you know that you are currently wrong about. I'll wait. Story 71. When someone writes, I should have done something rather than I should have done something, I'm fairly certain it's due to the way many American English speakers say should have as short for should have. But the general lack of self-awareness of what we are saying is a pet peeve. Story 72. God has a plan whenever something bad happens. How is God's plan of having my daughter bullied to the point she was put on suicide watch when she was 11 years old, causing 10 years of her struggling with mental health and debilitating social anxiety, for her missing out so much of her teen years being too scared to trust anybody other than me? A good thing. If God exists, he can write off if all this has been part of his plan. Story 73. My pet peeve is the exception that proves the rule. It's never used correctly, ever. The saying is intended to refer to, for example, a sign that says, no parking on Sundays, the exception, which implies that parking can occur on any other day, the rule. Not whatever godforsaken manner it's used to just reference any exception to whatever made-up rule the person saying it has decided is a rule. Story 74. Ende gut, alles gut. German for ending's fine, everything's fine. Like, no, what's with all the casualties? Is what I always ask myself in action movies. Millions of people die. The catastrophe of world's end gets prevented. Everything is peaceful again. Happy music comes on and everybody's happy. WTF? Story 75. Have your cake and eat it too. The saying actually goes, eat your cake and have it too, meaning you can't have it both ways, but the way people say it makes no sense. If I have a cake, I can eat it. Like, that's literally the point of having a cake, but I can't eat the cake first and then still have that whole cake afterwards. Every time I hear people say it wrong, it makes me so frustrated. Also, the customer is always right. No, the actual full proverb goes, the customer is always right in what they want. That second part completely changes the entire meaning of the proverb. It means that people know what they want, but it doesn't mean they're always in the right. Also, when people say literally but don't actually mean literally, or when people use the term cultural appropriation, but in reality they actually mean cultural misappropriation. Story 76. I found that some, in my experience, mostly American people say, I could care less, when they're saying that they don't care about something. But in Britain, the saying is, I couldn't care less, showing that you care so little about the topic that you literally couldn't care any less. The American way actually implies that you actually care a tiny amount, but it's never what they mean. Story 77. First impressions count. I've had trouble with this one for years, struggling to believe it because of all the times I've been so wrong with my first assumptions. In the same vein, this is the core of why I don't believe in dating apps. If it's true that first impressions count, dating apps rob you of that opportunity because your first impression is being made by photos of you, not you. Story 78. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Why not? That formation of that phrase makes no sense. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with wanting to eat a cake that you have. Now, if you were to say, you can't eat your cake and have it too, that makes sense. Story 79. I know I'm fighting a losing battle on this one, but people who say that's not my forte and they pronounce it forte. Nope. Saying it like forte means you're using the Italian derivation, which when used in English is exclusive to the musical notation meaning loud. The English word forte, meaning area of strength, is just pronounced fort. Story 80. It is what it is. You're just repeating words. Anyone can do that. A burger is a burger. I ate pasta yesterday. I drove to work. He's flying to Dallas. I'll be there in 5 minutes, there in 5 minutes. Everyone I've met keeps saying it's supposed to mean something like, you can't change a situation or something like that. But how do you get that from just repeating words? Story 81. The customer's always right is just people forgetting the entire quote and using it to be obnoxious assholes to service workers. The original is, customers are always right in matters of taste, referring to style or personal preference in selection, not food. So basically you can choose to buy /design/paint/remodel anything you like as it's your preference, but you are not right about being able to use an expired coupon or honoring a sales price that is no longer the specified price, or just being POS in general. People will use any excuse they can to validate being an asshat sometimes. Story 82. I wouldn't say it doesn't make sense, more so people don't understand the true meaning. When people, Usually family. Use the blood is thicker than water to manipulate someone's decision to favor family BC. That's what family is for, when the true quote is, the blood of the coven is thicker than the water of the womb, meaning the relationships we chose are stronger than the ones that are forced upon us, born with. Might not be the exact wording, but you get the point.